evening. We are Coping Life Talk number 91. And as always, we talk about coping skills. And today we have to cope with our technology. I am Dr. Lydia and our very faithful and wonderful co-hosts are Candy Sheehan and Scott Kiddle. And today, hi, we are hosting Desiree, Argentina, to hear more about coping skills from a professional who will be helping us to understand are our coping skills effective. We've learned that coping skills are a skill. It's a skill. We are not born with this. But now in this situation, Desiree, before I will ask question, please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Desiree Argentina, and I'm a mental health therapist. I used to work in an outpatient mental health clinic on the children's unit. So I worked with children between the ages of 5 and 19. And now I work in a middle school and high school providing mental health services to students in an effective needs program. So I have about 10 to 20 students on my caseload. And my next venture will hopefully be in private practice at the end of this year.
Lydia may be having problems again. Can you hear me, Desiree?
I
I
can.
can. Perfect. If you can, why don't you go ahead and tell us just a little bit about your program and what you do in that high school? Because, I have some real concerns about whether or not things are getting worse for our kids, and I suspect that maybe they are. And what is your take on that?
Yeah, so there are some studies that show that anxiety symptoms and depressive symptoms are increasing in children and teenagers, and unfortunately, suicide is one of the leading causes of death in young adults. So in my program specifically, I'm in an effective needs program with students with high needs, whether it's anxiety, PTSD, social emotional disturbance, things like that. So I am in a middle school and high school. There are three social workers, including myself, in the high school, in the middle school and high school, and we provide all sorts of services. We try to run groups; doesn't always work out with just the crises and high needs. But we do a lot of assessments, whether that's threat assessments, suicidal ideation assessments, self injury assessments. We provide mental health services. So I work with students that have IEPs. So I provide their mental health minutes. So yeah, it really depends on the student. I mean, it looks different for everybody. There's some students that they're very anxious and they don't go to their general education classrooms. So they will do their work in our classroom. I'll help them do their schoolwork. We'll talk about things going on with their families. It just really depends on the needs of the students. But this year, we've seen a very high increase in needs, and it's been honestly tough. It's me and the two other social workers. We're struggling. We were drowning there for a bit because the needs were just so much more than we could provide. So I think that even though it's really amazing that my school has three social workers, I just think it's just not enough. And we're one of the lucky ones that have that many social workers full time, because there are some schools that just don't have social workers at all or have social workers part time. So I think, in my personal opinion, I would love one social worker per grade just to focus on that specific grade, because we see really high needs with the sixth graders and really high needs with the ninth graders in their transition to middle school and high school. So ideally, that's what I would like. And I just, the funding, I guess, isn't there. But luckily for my school, they do put the students' mental health as a really high priority within the school.
I think that's so important, especially the pandemic only made things worse, and so I've seen that as a real concern. One of the things I wondered, I'm a special ed teacher, retired, and so I know the students you're talking about. I know the kids you're working with are the ones that I tried to help too. Since we've done this podcast, one of the things I learned was my way of helping kids handle stress might not have been the best way. And so when I heard you were coming, I was so anxious to hear what you had to say about that. Some of the kids I had with high anxiety, I would try to help them just kind of anticipate what was going to happen, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what might happen, and kind of work them through what they were going to do, to But after talking to some other professionals, they said, well, really, what they need to hear from you is you can't predict everything that will happen, but that they're going to be okay, and they're going to just going to go through this, and they'll come out on the other side. That was what I kind of caught from what they were saying. So, how do you handle anxiety with, say, really, I'm thinking about the age you're talking about, just middle school and high school. What's the best way for them to handle that?
Well, I would say, Candy, that I kind of agree with you in a way. I think it's really important for students to have a routine, to know the expectations, to know, obviously we don't always know what's going to happen. Every day looks, a little different, but it's really important for them to have structure. So I think providing that and letting them know that they have that structure, students do really well when they have the same staff, the people that they have relationships with. Students show an improvement not only within mental health but also academics when they have those people that they can rely on regularly, when they have staff returning each year and know what to expect. They have that routine, they have that structure. So that's very important for students. That's very, very important. So I think that that is a great thing that you did. And obviously not everything is consistent and stays the same. And I think our teens know that they've lived through quite a bit, so they do know that. But so it is also kind of an issue within schools at this point where we have so many staff leaving the fields because it's gotten very difficult. There's all these demands and unrealistic expectations, and that's harming the students because, like I said, they do better when they have these consistent relationships in their lives. And within mental health, one of the biggest predictors of success in therapy and mental health services is the relationship with your therapist. So the relationships within schools is so, so important. So I would say, Candy, if you had a great relationship with your students, that's the number one thing that would help them.
Desiree, I can't help but wonder about you made the statement about how staff members are leaving because of unrealistic expectations. Where are those unrealistic expectations coming from? And when do they start coming onto the scene?
Well, it definitely depends on the district and the state. I mean, we're seeing a lot of states putting in different, I guess, rules or laws or whatever for teachers, and they're just not realistic. I mean, even working in a school, there's first of all, the pay for teachers and school staff is horrific. So there's literally staff that can't afford just their basic needs. You see so many teachers, so many school staff working extra jobs, working Uber Eats, Lyft. I mean, these are staff that really need, I mean, in my opinion, no school staff should be making anything under 100,000, not one single penny, because it's such a hard job. And just working in a school, I worked in an elementary school prior to this, and it's just the needs for teachers when you're having a bad day and you're just not having it at work. I mean, teachers don't have that option. You have to be on all day, every day for these students. It's such a high demanding job. And I honestly, working in a school now, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could be a teacher. It's so hard. And you have 30 eyes, 60 eyes, 30 students just looking at you all day to guide them, to lead them, to teach them. But now it's not only, you're not just teaching them academics, teachers are expected to teach social emotional learning and take time out of their lessons to teach things about, emotional regulation and coping skills and things like that. And they're expected to turn in all their lesson plans. And a lot of our teachers, they're so short staffed, they're not getting any planning periods. They're subbing during all of their planning periods. There's no time. And then you're observed and you're expected to have these great lessons. And then you have to go home and do all the grading. You have to go home and do all your lesson plans. It's just not realistic.
One of the things too that in some schools are passing laws that you've got to have your whole year's lesson plans ready, to show. And, that is so unrealistic because, especially, I worked in special ed a lot. It was based on the need of that child I was teaching. And I couldn't say I knew where I wanted to get by the end of the year, but to know how I was going to get there, it was something that that change. I can make weekly lesson plans or maybe even monthly if I was lucky, but you just can't do it that way. That's not the way realistically that it can be done. And I hate that for teachers, because the thing that happens when teachers are under high pressure, who do you think that impacts? Those poor students that are sitting there, and you can't help it, but that's the way it works. So it's kind of a vicious cycle that we seem to be caught up in. And I wonder, do you have thought, is that anything you try to deal with in trying to break that cycle and making it better for kids? Or is that something you even address?
I mean, it's hard because you're right. A lot of the staff are really burned out. And I know just for me in particular, and, things I'm seeing online and my coworkers, a lot of staff, they have a really hard time. I guess another thing within teaching is, I guess, at any other job, you could take your mental health days, you could take sick days, but it's so hard to take a sick day as a school staff. It's, all this prepping and finding, the district finding a sub and things like that. So that makes it more difficult. But I think taking mental health days are really important. But you're right. When you're burned out and you're really stressed, the students can tell. They see that. And then you're not putting in your best effort, and maybe you're snapping or feeling a little bit irritable with the students, and they can tell. And again, that relationship's really important, and you don't want the student thinking it's their fault or anything they did, even though maybe it is. It's really hard to work with teenagers, so maybe that is contributing to a lot of the stress. They're moody and everything, so it is really tough. I think that I normally talk about how important it is to balance work life and home life, and then putting in boundaries at work, workplace boundaries, but I think it's just especially hard with teachers to do so.
My next question is, we had asked you to speak about, are your coping skills effective? And so we need to ask, tell me a little bit about that, or talk about that just a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is varies person to person. So this is not this is a healthy coping skill. This is an effective coping skill for you. It's so different for everybody. And I think people need to keep that in mind and just be mindful of the type of person you are, who you are, the things that help you. So I know we were talking a little bit about this before, and Dr. Lydia mentioned this, but the difference between unhealthy coping skills and coping and healthy coping skills. So unhealthy versus healthy, and some unhealthy coping skills, just to mention some, because some people don't even realize that these are unhealthy coping skills, but escaping. So that could be even just scrolling on social media for hours and seeking out that dopamine hit, and watching TV for hours on end, coming home from work, feeling exhausted, laying on the couch and watching Netflix the rest of the night. I mean, that's an unhealthy coping skill. We're zoning out, we're escaping our reality and those feelings and kind of numbing them. Obviously, substance use is an unhealthy coping skill. Self-harm, an unhealthy coping skill. Alcohol, even wine, even drinking glasses of wine after work, unhealthy, that could be an unhealthy coping skill. So these avoidant behaviors, even sleeping, going to sleep after work for hours, unhealthy. Again, I do recommend napping, but short, setting an alarm, making sure it's only 20 to 30 minutes. That's what I recommend. So yeah, different things like that, under eating or overeating. So those could be different unhealthy coping skills. But as for healthy coping skills, and again, some of these overlap, but these different categories and which category you fit into. So there's different physical coping skills. That could be spending time outside if you like to swim or kayak or go for a hike or go for a walk, getting some sun, getting that vitamin D, stretching, working out. And this is different for everybody too. Do you like going for a walk? Do you like doing high intensity interval training? Do you like doing yoga? Do you like boxing, weightlifting? So that's different for everybody. Different muscle relaxation techniques. Do you like different fidgets, eating a healthy snack? So those are different physical coping skills. As for creative, so again, this is the type of person you are. There could be writing, photography, painting, arts and crafts. If you're a musician, using music as an outlet, different mindfulness coping skills such as meditation, if you're a religious person, if you like to pray, or different deep breathing, or again, listening to music to become mindful. There's tons of mindfulness playlists on YouTube that you could seek out. Different relaxation techniques like reading or doing yoga, using essential oils for some aromatherapy, taking a short nap again, going for a walk, or social if you're a social person. So for me in particular, this is what works best for me for my coping skill. I love to vent. I'll call my sister and say, "Can I vent to you? I'm having a bad day," for a little bit and just get things off my chest. Seeing a therapist, spending time with friends or family, reaching out to loved ones, letting them know you're having a hard time. So depending on the type of person you are, your effective coping skill is going to be different. So you have to think about what helps you, what type of person you are, and what helps you to, feel better, de-stress, get things out, express your feelings in a healthy way.
I'd wonder about something that's been introduced into our society in the last, I don't know, what would we say, 10 years? Social media and the smartphone. It seems that any child that has been granted a smartphone spends inordinate amount of time on that device. And of course, you mentioned the dopamine hit of getting instant response to a text or whatever. What impact do you think on anxiety for students, and for that matter for adults, may be in play here?
Yeah, so there are some studies that show that spending a lot of time on social media does increase anxiety. So I would say if you have a child or you're somebody that struggles with anxiety, putting boundaries around your time on your phone or social media, whatever you're drawn to. And there's different apps that you can use. Or I know if you have an iPhone, you could put on a timer to let you know how often you're spending on social media. And you can have they have like a downtime section. So that's what I use personally. I put a downtime between 7 a.m. from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So 10 p.m. after that, I try not to use my phone anymore. And I wake up at 6, so I try not to use it the second I get up. But I know a lot of teens, a lot of people just in general, but teens especially, they're even staying up late at night because they're on their phones. They're staring at their phones. They're on social media. And I think that also an aspect of that is posting on social media. They're trying to gain this validation, this, outside validation from other people with all the different likes and all the comments. So I think that's harmful to self-esteem, which feeds into the anxiety. So it's just this vicious cycle. So, I always have these conversations with parents. I always have these different conversations with parents that they'll tell me, "I'm really struggling. My teen's always on their phone. They're just on their phone constantly." And I think parents kind of have this block, this mental block. I have conversations with them and I say, "Well, it's up to you. You're the parent. You can take away that phone. You can turn off the Wi-Fi. You can turn off, you could stop paying the phone bill. This is your device that you bought for them." So, and just setting those expectations, and again, kind of carving out phoneless time. So I recommend to families, you could have phoneless dinners. We're having a family dinner, no phones are allowed. Your bedtime's 10 p.m. I'm taking the phone. You can't have it until you wake up in the morning. So just different things like that. And if you're an adult, put those rules in place for yourself and your family.
And of course, you have the additional anxiety and stress of telling your child no more phone.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a huge fight and a huge battle. So sometimes, even when I worked at the outpatient mental health clinic, we would have the conversations together. I would tell parents, like, I could have this conversation with you. And some of the teens, they're really, really smart. They're really intuitive. They're aware that it's a problem. But it's hard. We're kind of in this society where it's just the expectation. You always have your phone with you. You're always looking at it. And it's to the point where it's really disrupting relationships, I feel. I mean, so many people tell me, and I've experienced this as well. You're having a conversation with somebody, you're talking, and then they pick up their phone to look at it and they're not listening to you anymore. So it's really disrupting relationships. And so many parents tell me, I try to talk to my kids, they don't look up from their phone. They're always on that damn phone, blah, blah. And so it's hard. And I think that just setting up those expectations to begin with, maybe right when you buy the phone, or if it's becoming a problem now, setting up those expectations, having a conversation with the teen, not as, they're in trouble or reprimanding them, but saying, this is a problem for all of us. We're trying to work on it, and these are the new expectations, and whatever works for you.
I'm curious about how has bullying changed with the ease of being really mean online and not having to be in front of another human being.
Yeah, so bullying is a huge issue. Cyberbullying is a huge, huge issue, and the problem with cyberbullying is that, back in the day before everybody had cell phones, you would get bullied at school, which obviously was horrible. But you leave school, and then you're hopefully in your safe place at home, and you could escape that bullying. But now you go home, and there's just no escape from it. It's just so insidious. It's just in your face all day every day, and it's really hard. And I think that it's it's a bigger obstacle because when a student is being bullied at school, taking away the cyberbullying, who's doing it, what's going on. But with the cyberbullying, there's so much. You could be anonymous online, so you don't exactly know who's doing it. You don't know who it's coming from. And there's, even if you even look at celebrities, there's so many celebrities that have been saying that they're getting off of social media because they can't handle the bullying. I mean, they can't even post a picture of them in a nice dress without getting bullied, so it's really sad, and it's really hard. And I don't know, it's a really big obstacle, and I don't know, it just seems like an uphill battle because while everybody experiences online bullying, who's doing it? Everybody's doing it, and I can't really comprehend how somebody could be so mean to somebody else. And I think just being online, being on social media, it kind of takes away that. It just doesn't feel like a real person, maybe. And I just wonder if a lot of these people who are saying these comments online would say that kind of comment to somebody in person if that person was in front of them. I think just being in the virtual space takes away that personal aspect to it. But yeah, cyberbullying is very, very difficult. The one thing that's good about it is that you can screenshot and trace everything if it was getting out of control and you did go to police or the school or whoever. But again, the hard part is a lot of the times the accounts are anonymous and you can't even figure out who's doing it. There's no connection. You could just easily make a Google account and make an Instagram account and with no ties to you.
I know there's always been bullying, and you stand in the hallways and watch the kids pass to class, from class to class. And I tried to be aware of that and tried to catch it, and because you could have a, somewhat success and stopping it or slowing it down. You're not going to end it, but it seems like now that our smartphones have made it so much easier to bully someone, and so it almost seems like the prevalence would be getting worse. I know anxiety seems to be increasing in kids, and sometimes I wonder if the phones are of much value. I guess you know where your kid is, but I'm concerned about that. It seems like we're trending in the wrong direction. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think social media can be very, very powerful and great things can come out of it. Just, how we were speaking a little earlier about the issues going on in Ukraine. There's just been amazing things happening, people posting how to help and how to donate and all these movements. And that's all coming from a lot of it's coming from social media. I follow a few accounts that, they raise money through their accounts to help homeless people. I mean, so social media can be extremely powerful if used for good, right? So then you have if used in a bad way. So I don't know if necessarily social media adds value for teenagers. I think it could add a lot of value for adults, but I don't know if just being in that stage of development, if it's exactly helpful. I think it may be more harmful.
Thank you so much. We have a comment here from Lynette Barr. She says, "Thank you for sharing so many great coping skills." And it's really, I had a problem on my side as today with our all this equipment and connection, but I was able to listen. And so I appreciate everything you many things maybe some people know, but not always, because repetition is the mother of learning, as we say. And so it is important to repeat, and sometimes we have to hear it many times. So Lynette, thank you so much for your comment, because it is important. And as for the social media, yes, it is interesting to me that you said maybe it is a little value for teenagers, but I want to make this bridge between adults and teenagers during again this time when so many adults are sitting and watching the news about the war in Ukraine. And of course, I can imagine if my mother was alive and she would start watching the news, and my dad and her will start talking about what's going on. The whole family hears all the comments, and the anxiety goes up. And so I appreciate you said that, especially with teenagers, it should be a house rule, and we are the parents. And I'm glad you emphasize that parents do have some control and power. And but the problem for me is that parents themselves sometimes need to sharpen. I'm a parent too, and grandparents need to sharpen our coping skills, because sometimes when we communicate with teenagers, they become defensive. I want to ask you a question. How will you advise our audience to talk to teenagers about not only social media, but about certain things, rules in the house, when parents try to say, this is how it is going to be, and their children and grandchildren simply reject it, become defensive, even rude, and talking about bullying, right? So in the families it exists too. So please tell us, how can parents and grandparents talk to their growing children and grandchildren?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And it
And it
is
is
really
really
tough
tough
to
to
have
have
those
those conversations.
conversations. And I would say that just be open and honest and, treat your child and teenager, at the appropriate age level and realize they are mature but you're going to get that pushback. You're going to get the tantrums. You're going to get the fighting. That's kind of a teenager's job, right? Is to push those boundaries. That's what they do best. But I think a big part of what you said, Dr. Lydia, as well, is that as the parents, as the adults, we have to model for them. So you can complain about your child's behavior, but if you're complaining that they're on their phone all day and then you're on your phone all day, that's, it's pretty hypocritical. So modeling the behavior that you want your teenager, your child to exhibit, and just letting them know that, just having those open conversations and treating them with maturity and respect, and letting them know these are the new expectations. You could fight all you want, and that's a part of the issue too, right? Is when a child does fight back, sometimes the parent just gives up and gives in, and that is a teaching moment for that child, letting them know, oh, okay, I could get away with this if I just fight hard enough. But if you stick to those boundaries, if you stick to those rules, those expectations, the child will learn what's expected of them. And it's not something that with a lot of kids is going to happen right away. This is going to take a while, and it's something that happens over time. So having that patience and having those coping skills, modeling the behavior you want seen, modeling the coping skills, because as you said earlier, Dr. Lydia, is that these coping skills, they are skills and we do have to practice them. So if you find a coping skill that you like or that you find is effective for you, but that it's really hard, keep practicing it, because we strengthen these coping skills. And try different ones, try all different ones and find out what works best for you. So as for meditation, meditation is very hard for me. I have a very hard time with it. My mind's always racing. I'm a very anxious person, so my mind goes like, a mile a minute. So something I found that works best for me is that I will, turn off my phone and I'll read for a little bit just to wind down in bed at night. And then I will use a meditation app at night. So that's what works best for me. Again, everybody's so individual. You have to find what works best for you. So I put on a meditation app every night before bed. And that's how I try to meditate. Because if you told me right now, go meditate for 10 minutes in your living room, I cannot do it. I will have a very difficult time. So again, strengthening those coping skills and finding out which one works best for you and reminding yourself and being patient with yourself and letting yourself know it's okay. It is a skill and I will strengthen this over time. It's the same thing with your teenagers and your kids. And that expectation is that things will hopefully get easier over time as long as you stick to those expectations and those rules and not give in and let them know that if they fight, they're going to be able to get away with things.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I want to just kind of emphasize one thing you said. I was a mother of a very strong willed child. He was incredible, and he could outsmart me most of the time, quite a bit of the time anyway. But one of the things he told me as an adult, I talked to him and I said, how in the world could we have avoided some of those major battles? What would have been the thing for me to do? I thought I tried everything I knew. And what he told me, he said, Mom, you had the right ideas. You did the right things. You gave up just a little bit too soon. Right about when I was ready to break, you broke first. And I thought, isn't that good to know? So I wanted to encourage other parents, if you've got a really strong-willed kid, know that it might not happen very quickly. I thought I had waited a long, long time, but if it's someone that's pretty strong-willed, you might have to wait longer than you think, or hold on to that, hold fast for longer than you would imagine.
Yes, definitely. And also, something I want to mention is that I did see a study at some point. I wouldn't be able to cite it anymore. I don't know where I saw it or where I read it, but the study said that children and teenagers have better mental health outcomes when their parents are actually in therapy. So, a lot of times when I worked at the outpatient mental health clinic, parents would come in, toss their child in and say, "Fix it, please. This is such a problem." But it's never just the child. It's never one person. If there's an issue within the family, it's a family issue. So I would always recommend sibling sessions if there's issues with the siblings. I would always recommend family sessions, and I would always recommend for the parents to seek their own therapy, because I think a family as a whole, if they're seeking help, if they're trying to strengthen those skills and learn that emotional regulation and those different parenting skills, the whole family as a whole will do better. You will see improvements in your child. So that's something I always recommend as well. If you think that your child needs to go to therapy, I think that's a signal that maybe it could also be beneficial for you as well as a parent.
Lydia, you're muted.
I unmuted myself. On. Okay, am I on? You work mostly with teenagers and sure with parents as well. But it is not a secret that parents themselves have problems in the family, at work, and so they have to cope. My question to you, what we just heard yesterday, I never heard of that. Because husbands and wives communicate between each other either over their problems in the family with their growing kids, or groceries, money, marriage issues, whatever it can be. Question I have, what we've heard yesterday, that you know how we women say, oh, my husband never listens to what I say. Scott is my husband, by the way, but he does listen. But so my question is, did you hear it often that women just like, we just don't know. You repeat 7 times, you repeat 12 times, and it just no effect. And what I've heard yesterday was that for a man to really listen makes him to ask a question. Only when a man asks a question, then he listens. Is it true?
I I
I
don't
don't
necessarily
necessarily
think
think
that's
that's
true
true.
in a general sense because everybody is so different. So I think individually, I think it really depends on the person because I think some people just have different tells and different things that they do when they're really listening. I know for in particular, my partner, we're not married, but I've been with him a very long time. He doesn't ask that many questions when he's listening. He looks down. So I could tell he's listening when he looks down because he's thinking really hard. So and focusing, and he has ADHD, so he's really focusing, trying to focus on what I say. So I think it really depends on each person, and I think definitely for some people, them asking questions is definitely them listening. And I think that, within therapy, within the mental health field, we're taught to reflect a lot and ask questions and ask the person to reflect. So I think we kind of get in this habit within the mental health field to ask questions when we're listening. But I think it really does depend on the person. So yeah, I would say it depends. We're all just so individual. It's just really hard for me to generalize in that way.
Thank you for saying that because I've been thinking about this statement, and Scott and I talked about it, and I thought, from the beginning, I thought, Scott does not ask questions as my husband too often. We just have a communication. What we did learn, we did have to learn how to talk, that each of us has an equal, at least approximately, part in the conversation. Am I right, Scott? So, like for example, I used to be, if I get excited, then I talk, 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 and then I could see his eyes kind of start gazing, and I thought, no, that's not right. So I need to stop, and then I need to give my spouse a few minutes at least, tries to say something, and then it's a hard thing. It's a skill to, because you have so much to say, you have to just much information and so many examples. But I think when I've learned to just simply stop and then pause and then invite, in a way, though we do talk, invite my spouse to enter and speak. So then I've learned that Scott equally has lots to say, lots of wonderful examples, lots of wonderful illustrations. But, and what I had, another thing I had to learn is not to start gazing when he's talking, not to start producing new series of questions. So could you talk a little about this culture of communication, because it's a huge element of our coping with the relationship.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And
And
even
even
listening
listening
is a
is a skill.
skill. It doesn't come easily to everybody. It can be really hard to listen. And I find, I'm one of those people that when somebody's talking, I'm kind of waiting for my turn. I'm waiting to talk and put my input in. So it's definitely a skill. And I think a part of that is becoming mindful and mindfulness and sitting in something I've been talking about a lot recently is sitting in discomfort. Sometimes we don't want to hear what our spouse has to say. Sometimes we just don't care. But with that mutual respect and loving that person, realizing this is an important part of our relationship. Hearing your partner is very important. That communication is very important. So sitting in discomfort is a skill. That distress tolerance is a skill that people learn. And it, again, like with this coping skills, it gets stronger with more practice. And I think it's okay also to have those open conversations with your partner to let them know, I'm sorry, I care about what you have to say. I want to hear it, but I'm not in the space right now to listen. I had a hard day at work. I'm tired. I just want to relax. I just want to watch something for 20 minutes. I just want to go work out. Just having those open conversations with your needs as well, because as much as whatever your partner has to say is important and important for them, for you to hear, your needs are also important as well. And again, it's okay. We're not all perfect. We all have our flaws. So if your partner is speaking with you and having a conversation and you find yourself just gazing away, drifting off, daydreaming, pulling it back and saying, I'm so sorry. I spaced out for a minute. Can you please repeat what you just said? I'm so sorry. And, it takes practice. So again, listening is a skill and that communication is a skill. And if you notice that you're speaking to your partner and they're not listening, again, being honest, saying, "Hey, are you in a space to talk right now? And did you hear what I just said? I noticed you're feeling a little spacey. Is everything okay?" Just checking in with your partner. I think a lot of people are really quick to react in anger. And I think there's a lot of feelings under that anger. We'll snap, we'll give the cold shoulder, we'll yell, we'll shout, we'll have an attitude. But really the feeling underneath that anger is not being heard, is feeling hurt, is feeling maybe even not loved by your partner or not respected. So I think checking in with how you're feeling, those feelings underneath, and not reacting in anger, but maybe understanding and some empathy, and realizing your partner may not always be in the right space for that communication. And it's always okay to go back to it later. So, again, just these open conversations.
Thank you. This is wonderful. And relating to this, we just talked about men who supposedly only listens when he asks a question. And I think that I invite our audience to think about it, how it is in your families, in your relationships, and also simply even at work. But relating to this, it is even a book, How Women Need to Talk That Men Really Do Listen. So any advice from this point? Because you know how it is at work. Women are usually perceived as a weaker gender, and it does not matter how much our society is progressing from this point, but still, it is a very different attitude from, for example, colleagues. If a woman is a boss and she starts acting firmly, speaking firmly, and showing her leadership, then, sorry for the language, people say, oh, she's a bitch. If a man speaks with the same attitude, same style of leadership, he's strong. He's a good leader. So how can women talk that men do listen?
Well, I think speaking normally as we normally do. And I think you're right. We've come a really, really long and far way. And it is interesting because being in the mental health fields, I'm in a largely woman dominated field. I mean, when I worked at the mental health clinic, we had a few males that worked there, but I was mostly surrounded by women and on a team with a lot of women. I had two males on my team of seven of us. And one was my supervisor, and we did have a woman director, and she wasn't well liked. People did not really like her communication styles. People definitely got along with my supervisor better and would go to him usually. But again, I don't always think it's particularly. I do see that, you know, women are treated a certain way and men are treated a certain way, but sometimes the woman is not nice. You know, it's not, you know, it just depends on the person. But I think a lot of education, I think a lot of calling out, and I think a lot of, you know, seeing these differences. I can't remember all the examples now, but I had hanging in my office for my teenagers and kids to see something about those kind of gender stereotypes. So it was a list of things that girls are typically called, like bossy and, you know, a bitch and things like that. And then the alternate. So for, you know, little girls, or whenever they're speaking demands or, you know, putting plans in place or anything, they're called bossy. So the alternate was, you know, she's a leader. So I would give these, you know, worksheets to parents sometimes. So just paying attention to that language and then looking at that alternate language. But I don't think there's anything we could exactly say that makes men listen. I think that we just have to, in general, support each other and learn and educate each other and call out these differences when we see them. And that's up to men and women. And unfortunately, a lot of times I think men do listen to men more. So if you are a man that does understand this and you do see these differences, to speak out about it, because I think that all we could do is really educate each other and support each other and be there for each other.
Thank you. So it is all about two sides. It's always two sides. And that's what also, of course, I'm thinking now about what's going on with Ukraine and with Russia. And I listened today to Putin. My daughter sent me a link to his kind of urgent conversation, his answers to women. And that's what, from that perspective, I approached this video and I started listening. And what was so striking to me, those women were very strong. They are all in aviation. And as we know that now the planes are returning to Russia from by Canada and the US. And so imagine they struggle, first of all, on many levels. So with their job security, also with their families, young women, beautiful women. So they are in the presence of the President Putin, and the question was very carefully crafted. I could hear fear that the woman who asked that, she tried to show that she's not criticizing by no means, but she wanted to know what is in the future. Where will this she doesn't even use the word war, because this is not how ideology and social media presented. But so she asked a question, what is in the future? Instead of giving, that's what we are talking about, women talking, Putin started talking non-stop. Imagine he has like about maybe 6-7 women listening, and being a good leader, I would stop, answer her question, and then let them into the conversation. So that really created an impression on me that all he wanted is to say what people should believe, just one extra time repeating where what is happening by through his eyes. And that's what I thought, that how important it is when we have conversations like this at work. And sometimes we have bullying bosses, we have colleagues who may be managers who keep us silent and only say things that important for them. So when we are on this side, sort of on a press side, we also need to have coping skills, professional coping skills for communication. How will you advise? Not in this case, of course, that I gave an example, because it might be simply dangerous for women to even squeeze one extra question, or maybe they were instructed no more questions, just one. But in a normal situation, in a democratic situation, how will you, still it happens, it's not a secret, how can not only women but men, when they are in a subordinate role, learn to express themselves without being perceived as aggressive, as critical, but simply to have a conversation?
Yeah, so I think again at work, with colleagues, this is again, if you're talking about men and women, I think it's important for women to let people know when they're being spoken over, when they're not able to speak. So this is hard because it takes a lot of practice. Again, these are skills that we can enhance and practice. So if you find at work that when you have an idea or you're in a meeting and you're speaking or asking a question and somebody's speaking over you, you might want to role play that a bit. You can talk to a therapist or a trusted friend or loved one and role play these situations a bit and become comfortable with asserting yourself. And assertiveness is a skill. I mean, it's a very difficult skill to have, and it takes a lot of practice. So I think here we're talking about assertiveness, especially when it comes to if you're a woman and you find that a male at work is always speaking over you, becoming comfortable with saying, I wasn't done speaking. Or, a lot of times I know women experience that they'll say something and a man will repeat that same thing back to them in a different way. So saying, oh, yes, that's what I just said. Thank you for re-explaining what I had just said. So just standing up for yourself in that way and being assertive. Again, it takes a lot of practice and it's really hard. So you can do role playing with a friend, or you can, if there's somebody at work that you trust, a colleague, you can speak with them, or if there's a different supervisor. But if it's becoming too out of control and you're feeling like you're being bullied at work, seeking help from HR, letting them know the situation. And again, that is really tough. And maybe I know some people feel like that might make the situation worse. So unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to workplace bullying and you don't feel respected at work, and again, we spend so much of our time at work. A lot of us spend most of our day at work and commuting and not at home. So that can deeply, deeply impact your mental health. So sometimes our only option is to leave that job and to find another job where we feel better respected and feel like our mental health is better. So it just depends on the situation, but I think here you're going to want to strengthen your workplace boundaries as well as your assertiveness skills.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Any more questions?
I'm kind of going to change the subject again because I just noticed although we've been talking a little bit about the Ukrainian situation. I was watching the news just a little bit, and I saw this picture of a little boy, and I assumed that he just wasn't keeping up with his family. But the look on his face was absolutely heartbreaking. And I have a daughter-in-law that does a pretty good job of keeping her kids off. They might not see this, but yet I know some children will see these images of children in very dire situations, sleeping on the ground, walking by themselves for what looked like forever, And how do you help parents cope, help their children cope? What do you do for kids whenever they see some of these images that are really very frightening, that must be very disturbing for them?
That's a great question. I think that's something important to realize for parents and adults, guardians, caretakers, is that I think a lot of times guardians don't realize that their children listen and are paying attention and do know what's going on in the world. I think a lot of times adults can dismiss children and teenagers and say, oh, they're just kids. They don't understand. They don't realize. But kids and teenagers, they're so intuitive, they're so smart, they pay attention and listen to everything. So I think it's important to address these things that are going on in the world with kids and teenagers. I think it's important to have those conversations and just be honest and reaffirm their feelings and let them know how you're feeling, that like this is very scary what's going on in the world, and it's hard and it's hard to see, and again trying to maybe limit that exposure, but maybe talking to kids in a different way, and letting them know that we know this is happening in the world and it's really hard, but you are safe, we are here, doing some grounding with them. You're at home, we're with our family, we're safe. And maybe again that kind of helpless feeling that some people are feeling, seeing all these things happen, maybe do something with your child to help, maybe donate or protest or something, different ways. I was speaking with somebody, not about this particular situation in Ukraine, but I was speaking with years ago a family that they were driving somewhere. A mom was telling me that her and her kids were driving somewhere and they saw a homeless person, and her child just could not stop talking about this homeless person. So they went and bought them things. And, the mother brought the child to the store. They picked out food, things, socks, whatever for this person. And they went and gave it to this person. And just as a way to maybe help your child feel not as helpless, like they can do something to make the world a better place. They can help people that they're seeing and show them, hey, let's donate to this. And you saw this dog that made you really sad. Let's donate to the animal shelter. So having those conversations with your child, letting them know they're safe, do some grounding with them, and maybe doing something that will help them to feel like they're making a difference in a positive way.
I like this. Thank you, Candy, for the question, and thank you, Desiree, because that takes me back to where you said during this time when what is a healthy way to deal and cope with all this news. First of all, you said step away, do not watch news all the time, do not jump in the middle of the night. I know many people do, and they continue watching. And then, of course, that leads maybe to even snacking during the night and getting over anxious. But the thing is that with what you said got my attention. Try to share some good news even during this bad time, a kind of anxious time, critical time. And I thought, wow, that's a great advice, because what I found out in the middle of this news coming from Russia, I'm from Russia. And so, but my children are quarter Ukrainians. And so that's what, imagine for us, it's like, it's both sides, and we follow both sides, and of course we don't over watch, and we don't spend maybe too much time. But I started watching more because I thought I needed professionally to understand what's going on. But my question is like, not question, but a comment on your statement. Try to share some positive news. And I want to share some positive news because I just heard them, though I did watch the online news. One of them was about the Russian soldier that was taken in the midst of that and scared young boy, absolutely young, 18 years old, drafted in a foreign country, and probably struggling with his role. And Ukrainian people came to him and gave him food. And he just broke down in tears, not expecting, in the midst of this probably fear and horror, that people he attacked from Russia, they fed him. And I thought, what a beautiful example, because deep inside we are all the same people, we love each other, and not ordinary people usually, they never start wars. Usually it's all politics and some maybe, pulling the blanket from one side of the ocean to another side of the ocean. So it's always something about those people who are not with ordinary people, who have nothing to pull, nothing to take from each other. But when it comes to critical situations, people are kind and loving and help each other. And I'm sure that they don't ask for a passport when they see a person on the ground before they attend to the person or wrap the wounds and take a person to the emergency room. So I think humanity is good, and coping is important. So what at the end, unless we have other questions at this point, Candy and Scott, I wanted to I think Scott has a question.
Well, I had a question about we had a little bit of there. Yes, so I was going to ask a question about helicopter parents and how there's a potential for those parents to solve all their kids' problems and shelter them from all the possible consequences of their poor choices. And I appreciated what you said about talking with children about the things that they see on television, perhaps some of these disturbing sites, and then acting positively as best as you can under the circumstances. I appreciated that. Where do you think this helicopter parenting came from, and could that be actually contributing to children's anxiety because they're not allowed to solve their own problems?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that helicopter parents, they come from a good place. They want to protect their children at all costs. They want to solve things for their children. They don't want their children to experience anything bad or harmful or hurtful. But I think they are setting up their children for a really hard life, and I think that it's a great disservice to their children because life is hard. Things happen that we don't expect. We see things that we can't imagine. And it is a parent's duty to protect their child. But children need to experience life and reality to they just need that reality to grow as a person and to be able to be a functioning adult and functioning human being in society, because I think that, again, it's coming from a really good place, but I think it's controlling. And I think that children get stifled and they don't have an accurate representation of how the world works and how things go and what happens when they're an adult and they're at a job and someone makes a comment or their boss says something. I mean, you can't have your guardian call and yell at your boss. So I think that living life and all these skills that we've been talking about, assertiveness and boundaries and coping skills, these are all things that need to be learned and need to be experienced. And I think that helicopter parents, they really limit their child's experience, and children learn through experience. So I think they're really stifling their learning, and their skill building. So it is a disservice. And I would say to any parent that's really struggling with this, because obviously as a parent, you want to protect your child at all costs, I would say seek out therapy, seek out mental health services, speak to loved ones, let them know that you're struggling, because pulling back a little bit and letting your child experience life and have hardships and work through them themselves. If they're having a fight with a friend, not stepping in, letting them solve it on their own, it's really, really difficult. So I think seeking out support, because that is a skill that that parent is going to have to learn how to pull back a little bit.
That's a great question and a great comment. Thank you. Important. And I think it also relates to resilience. Because if parents are over controlling and they protect children, which is maybe better for them because their anxiety is lower when they see children 24/7 and know where they are and they track them on the phones, their locations. But the thing is that then we rob our children from becoming resilient. And resilience is very connected to coping skills. It's different, but that's a totally different maybe podcast. Maybe we will invite you back to talk about how to build resilience. And will you do that?
That would be great. Resiliency is definitely a whole other topic. So yeah, that would be amazing.
So let's plan on that. And also, I want to thank our audience and you, first of all, Desiree, and Candy and Scott, for your patience today with all this unexpected technology issues. And it doesn't happen that often, but started happening, and I could see that my computer is really giving up. So we will wrap up today, and then I will communicate with you, Desiree, and maybe we can have you back to help all of us to become more resilient. Thank you very much. Thank you for your absolutely wonderful answers and teaching on what it is to have effective coping skills. And I appreciated Lynette Barr for that comment that it's really a wonderful list of coping skills that everybody needs to have. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening, and we will host you again. Have a good rest of the day. See you, everybody, next Saturday. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.